Yeah, hi, this is Shedosaurus. Welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at quite a unique machine. This is a saw blade setter from way back when. I don't actually have any details or information on how it works. The only details you can see there is, so it's a JLM, and it looks like it's from round about, it could be 1965 made, if that date is correct. All this says here is approved or verified. There's no other things on it that I can see. Some parts I've already taken off and given it a clean to try and get them working, like this spring section here. You can see the one on this side is still dirty and totally locked up. This unit here, which slides forward and goes back and lifts and raises that part there, also no idea, that was completely jammed up. I'll put them back on just for the sake of starting the video, and then I'm going to take each piece off, give it a bit of a clean up, and get it back together, and hopefully then see how it actually all works. This part here is the part that forwards the blade on to the next unit and also locks it into place. I think the spring could probably do with a bit of a tweak, but this whole thing, this needs to drop a lot faster. It's not dropping properly or anything like that. This is the actual setter that goes back and forth and will set the blade on. The blade's not in the correct position, but all of this part is really sticky and everything, and so you're going to pretty much do a complete tear down, give it all a good clean, give it an oiling, and put it back together. It's got these fittings here for oiling. It's not a grease type fitting, it's a almost like a Bridgeport Zerk type fitting, where it's a push oil unit that goes on there, and I think somebody's tried to use grease on them in the old days, and that's causing things to get sticky. There's also another couple around the back here, there, and inside there and there, seem to be for the slides. The blade itself goes up and down on this unit here, which has a lock and is operated quite nicely, sort of thing, from the back here, and the handle that raises and lowers. That's also a bit sticky and needs a good clean, but we'll get to each part separately, and I probably won't show the actual cleaning process or just the descaling or de-rust process. We're just going to show the strip down more and putting it back together. So saw blade setting is to put a bend in the tooth. I'm not sure if you can see it, but this tooth is bent out this way, that's bent out that way, and it's just enough to make the blade slide through the wood easily enough. It makes it the cut slightly larger than the saw blade thickness itself, and so it goes through smoothly. Here are some older or other versions of it. This, I suppose, would be the newest style, and it's got adjustable points so that you can change the angle that you're setting to, but something like this on a large saw blade is not pretty good. It'd be something more like this kind of thing. This beautiful old beast, that's a what's it, Distin USA, it's a Triumph. Beautiful old piece. It just says the same on that side, and once again, this one's got a rotatable head for changing the angle of the set itself. Then you get this beautiful old, very highly ornate, let's try and get some better light on that, highly ornate piece with lots of fretwork, I suppose you'd call it, or really fancy, and it's just this little piece here that's coming down on the blade, but this is made for a lot finer blades, a lot smaller blades. As you can see, very beautiful piece. That much work gone into that, just getting the designs and stuff like that, and a very fine casting, if it was a casting. I'm not too sure how they got those patterns on. And then of course this larger one here, this brand is APA, and these would bolt to a table, and you'd have the blade sort of separate, being able to move back and forth this would rest on the top of the blade, and then as you turn the blade and you do the one every second tooth, and then you turn it around and do every second tooth from the other side to get you set. This was the best thing I had until I found this old beast at the scrap, and luckily got to it before it was damaged. So we're gonna have a look and see. Anybody who's ever worked on this, please tell me what everything does. Would be wonderful to know. So start off on just removing the blade, which is a left-handed thread, and that's, I suppose, so it doesn't loosen itself while you're tightening. It's got a double-sided cone unit here for different size arbors, which is quite nice. I'm not sure of the maximum size blade that you could sharpen on this, but I'm going to guess it's around, I measured vaguely and got about 800. But what I'd really like to be able to do is to maybe even convert this, or have something else that can bolt in here that will then hold a bandsaw blade to go through, so that I can forward then and set the bandsaw blade. And the good thing is you don't have to do it from one side then the other. This goes both ways, so it does both, the left and the right set. How it does, I think, is it's missing two sections here, and they would go through and push onto these things, which are spring loaded, and that would stop them going back, and that's your maximum set to your blade, so that all your sets are the same, because the further you go, the more it's going to set it. So there must be some way to limit the movement there. Not too sure how. With the blade out of the way now, you can see the lifting and lowering mechanism a bit better. Sorry about all the shadow play here. This part's fairly badly rusted up, or just surface rust mainly, but you can see at the bottom it's still nice and clean where it's been sitting. This part here seems to be a set that you would somehow, maybe if you were working up to a fixed size all the time, and that, so you would raise or lower that accordingly, so that it wouldn't go down past a certain zone. I'm actually not 100% sure why it's got a secondary lock unit, locking cams, and then of course this cross unit here with these pins, and that's meant to push onto the blade. So you can see it was actually made for something that's quite a large blade, judging by the size of that too, but yet it doesn't have massive distance here, and the foot at the bottom would give it away that it's not made for very large saws, as with the size of that collar. But maybe it came with different arbor or collars for different size arbors, who knows. Anyway, let's get started. Something quite interesting that I just noticed is that when you pull the handle to raise or lower the blade, if you then lock that into place, the handle can still move, and it raises and lowers then the bottom section, which you can then lock in place. That's pretty interesting design. I'm once again not 100% sure why, but a lot of effort's gone into making that part, so it does play its part. For starters, because it's a bit long and in the way, I'm going to be taking off the 4 bolts that hold that whole mechanism onto the machine, and just put that out of the way for starters, and clean it up later. So I'm going to start off by removing this unit here. I've already cleaned that up. This was totally jammed, but it seems so. This is a spring-loaded plunger here, and this thing's very well made. I mean, all these items are first pinned and then bolted in, which shows that it's a need for precision on this. But so I don't know if you'd be wanting the top of your blade to be hitting that, because then it might dull the blade, or make the point a bit more dull. maybe it's you have a setting where this part here, you know, you'd set that and go, okay, that's where that blade goes to, and then you'd take it back, and then you've got a way to reset that blade, is you know that it's at that point, but there's no measurements on this shaft, so I'm still not too sure what that's all about. So this part comes off first, and then we're going to take that part off there. So got that part off, and you can just hear by the sound, I mean, this is quality steel. Everything on this seems to have the stamps at 95 on it. I'm not sure what that's all about, but and you can see they're angled, so that'll push this guy up and down. Like I said, when I first started, this was totally rusted and jammed up, as was this, and they've cleaned up and oiled up quite nicely. So next I'm going to take this section off here, which because I've already had this part off, this is still fairly loose, and hence is going to come out nice and easily. Trying not to lose the screws. The weird thing about this is, even though it's a fairly old item, it seems to have metric fittings on it, like a Imperial Allen keys don't fit, so go figure. As you can see, the way that goes, looks like it's got a hardened point on there too, for that cam to rub against, sort of thing. And quite a strong spring, but I mean, what's the purpose? There's no signs of scratching on it, so either this steel's a hell of a lot harder than the spring steel of the blades, or who knows what. But yeah, what's that for? So next part is going to be taking this guy off, and he's got 2 bolts from underneath, and once I've got him off, I'll come back on. That's not a bent pin, that's actually the angle that they've drilled it in. I like to use a sharp chisel that you can get under these things a bit easier, and slowly lever them up to get, but luckily with this one, the pin is only just visible from underneath, whereas this one, the pin is, the hole is quite easily visible. So I'm going to get under there with a good pin punch, that's the perfect size for it, and knock that pin out. So got that pin out. I'll just level him off for when he gets knocked back in. And so this is a locator that looks like it's pretty strong. That's actually been added on, so this was a single piece and then it's been brazed on from the looks of it, and has a spring loading. Now with the double bolts at the back here, I'm not sure if they're meant to be loosened and tightened, because if you look, that's sort of tightened straight up onto that shoulder. Are these sometimes backed off so that these can go forward more? And now these screws are only part of the whole machine that are a different color, which makes me think that they had an important role. Somebody's put the red on it to bring your attention to it. So that's why I still think that there's shafts that go through and would push on there, and it stops how far it would go across to actually click on, or where the blade would push and stop, to stop the amount of bend you're putting into it. So see, 95 again. I have googled this particular, they make other machinery, but there was not one mention of a saw blade setter on this, on the whole of Google. Next part I'm going to take off is the advancing arm. It doesn't seem to have much more travel past that point. That seems to, it hits on the handle hits on the back here, and then it's got a cam over there that when that's pushed forward, these come forward and clamp the blade. That is adjusted by how thick a blade you want to clamp by that over there. So, but let's take this this guy off first. That doesn't really want to budge at this stage, and I might just take it off from here. But while we're getting the penetrating oil working in there, that going to take off this cover plate here. It looks like these fittings protrude past, you can see as it comes off. Take that off. So that's the lock for that sliding part there. That was also completely rusted fast when I first started. I just threw oil on everything and saw what I could move and what I could wiggle and get working again, and so that gives us a bit more of a clearer view of what's going in there. Going on in there, should I say. You can see these two oilers here, so that's for that unit there. To me it almost looks like this might have had oil as a little oil bath in there. No, actually no, it would probably all be leaking out here because it goes through to that, and that is a tight fit, but it's not that tight a fit on it, although that's actually got zero movement in it. So what's good is this, it seems that this doesn't have a hell of a lot of wear. So but I mean, I'd really like to remove this part next, but this all looks like it's going through on itself here. So one thing at a time. I'm going to get that off yet. It's pretty tight. Oh, that's got movement in it. So let's see if I can. No. Okay. Yeah. Too much surface rust on there. I'm going to get some emery paper and clean up that shaft so it can lift that part off. 240 grit emery paper. I'll just work my way around. Seems to be removing most of what's on the surface there. Probably doesn't have to be perfect. Much better. A bit of motion lotion. There you go. So it's got its stuff, so that can be adjusted backwards and forwards depending on what blade you're putting in, but that should be just dropping down. Surprised it's not even slightly spring loaded. And of course, yeah, you've got your adjustment here for how high or how low it's going to be sitting in the teeth itself. So next I'll remove that arm. So other than those first couple of parts, Never seen one of these things dismantled, or there's no parts diagrams or anything like that for them. I'm flying totally blind as to what I should be doing here, but welcome aboard for the journey. That's just a spring loaded part. And then that should now come out, but it's not, it's sticking somewhere. So I cannot find any reason for it to be stubborn. So got it moving just a wee bit more. I'm just going to use a little bit of a brass rod here, and it's working nicely. So, next piece off. Got a bit of a bend to it, so at some stage this machine's either been hit or fallen, but I don't see any other damage from a fall, so I'm going to just say somebody's hit it with something. Next I'm going to take off this handle here. I'm not sure if it's in the right order of what I'm doing, but this is one of the parts that I've already taken off and given a bit of an oiling. So it's coming. So it's got that locking mechanism whereby the whole thing is threaded and then they cut, and then by just screwing that in it clamps on, and so it won't move at all. That seems to be coming off alright. I haven't had this part off yet. Considering they probably didn't make a hell of a lot of these machines, they've gone into a hell of a lot of detail in the manufacture. This probably wasn't a very cheap machine when it was first made. I dare say they were quite expensive. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to want to remove this unit here, but now this whole thing is spring loaded. That's for the advance of each tooth, but I think what I'd like to do is very carefully take the tension off that spring. I was going to put a piece of wire in there with a hook and grab hold of that spring and then knock the pin out and then slowly release it, but then I had a look around the back, and I'm going to have to readjust the camera. So there's the other side there, and you can see it's just it's like a peg. It's got a stepped section that fits inside the hole, and that holds the spring. So I'm going to be hooking onto that, pulling the spring, taking that out, and then slowly releasing the spring. That actually came out fairly easy. You can see that's all it kept the spring in. What's also good is I thought that the spring might be a little bit weak, so it doesn't look like it'll be too hard to change it out to something stronger in the future if need be. Coming back to the other side now that that spring is no longer there, take off these distance setting attachments. That should just, oh, that's a very fine fit there, nice piston fit, and like I said, there was no play in that at all. You can see there's the end of the spring. Quite an interesting looking little spring. They don't make them like that anymore probably. Anyway, so it's that part there keys in onto this bottom section, so that it's again it seems to be quite an accurate piece of equipment. I mean, everything is done really well. Next, I'm going to take out these, looks like only 3 Allen keys, and take that section off there. Looks like that's the next logical. Okay, that part came off with just a little bit of a tap once got the screws out. No pins in that one, so I suppose it doesn't really matter if it's a tiny bit out, but quite a snug fit on. Next, 4 large Allen bolts here. I'm going to undo them, and then hopefully this whole section here, and it looks like that's all one piece across. All of that should come off in one hit. Also, I think because of the complexity of this part, I would not be surprised if this one is pinned to the body. And looking through here, there could be something. It's just kind of hard to see in there at the moment, but once I've loosened these, we'll soon find out. As expected, there's that bolt in there, and I think that could be a pin, but at this stage it's a little bit too hard to see what it actually is. That other little piece in there, that actually is a pin. So I'm going to see, looks like I might be able to knock it out from the back. I'll try it. That was another pin. Very hard to get out. With the pin punch it wouldn't come out, but with a starter drift and a larger bangometer it actually flew out at a rate of knots, and I had to go look for it. But now I've got to looks like right up in the top inside there that there could be another one, but I don't seem to be able to find a way to get to the back there, short of taking this whole head unit off the stand. That might be my only other option, unless I can just pry it off now that this other one's off. I don't see any others at this stage, and my other idea was to then maybe take off this dovetail unit. It looks like it's pretty much just pulling a pin out over here, and that should disconnect it from that arm. That'll probably just spin around because that's a bearing unit, and then taking these guys off, it should actually just lift out. So but let me try and shift this a little bit first, and failing that, we'll go to plan B and remove this first. Making some headway. I've just been going around from side to side with the nice sharp chisel. That probably won't be sharp after this, and slowly levering it off one side to the next. And looks like it's coming, so I'll just continue that and come back. So I've been making some good headway. I'm now at the stage where I'm going to try and put in a couple of Red Devil tools and try and split it further. Looks like that's doing the trick, because if you get to the point where you've loosened it off the surfaces, but you start bashing on that too much now, it's not going to be happy with you, because you don't want to go snapping that pin by going like this too much. You go like that and it'll snap. So it's coming though, just a bit slower than what I expected. Looks like we need to focus a bit more on the bottom here. I think that bottom's what I said is a screw, and it had a bolt that had a nut on it. I think though that is a pretty fine locating pin as well, because it seems to be holding just as good as the pin above it, which didn't have a thread on or a bolt on it. There you go. So it turns out that that bolt was a locator pin as well, and it pulled out to a certain point and then got stuck, and then actually had to come out of the back casing. That's what was taking so long. And looks like even here, that was just sitting on there, it's fallen off. is that there's a tiny little piece of the casing that came off with that, but it is so small and inconsequential that there's nothing to worry about. It'll go back in fine. Good day when these things come apart easily like that. Next, gonna take out the guide to that dovetail. Probably first loosen off these screws, although that one's already a little bit loose, I can feel. First of all, I suppose take this guy off, then that one, and that whole piece should then come off. So I did back those off just a little bit. I've taken those out. And there you go. Looks pretty good still. Doesn't look like this is seeing much rain. Once again, this 95, it's either 95 or 795 stamped everywhere. Anyway, that must be their model number or something like that. And should have actually taken that off first, shouldn't I? Actually looks like we've got a very small flathead screw there. So once I've undone that screw, then that's just a pin. I was kind of hoping it would be and not a screw, so so that's where the pin goes, and then it seems to have this, that's for carrying oil through for lubrication. That part should now slide free. And the dovetail should come out. There you go. And yep, somebody's put grease in there where there should have been oil. There's one of the problems straight away. So many people think those fittings are for grease, and yes, on a lot of machines they are, but when it's if you look at the lubricating nipple closely, it's or if you look at the system, you'll find that it's more likely on older machinery. I've found a lot more than newer stuff is not made for grease. It just makes the whole thing sticky, and you know, whereas the oil just keeps it, and the oil flushes away dirt all the time, keeps on flushing, whereas the grease is just going to collect dirt and make it all gungy. So looking at the cam unit here, I've taken off those top bits, but there's a fair bit of really old gunky hardened grease in there that just pretty much crumbles. The mechanism, just an offset cam, that's all it is. I'm going to give that just a light clean. I'm not going to get too fussy on that because bearings still look good if I just keep the grease in, or sorry, keep some nice thick oil, maybe some gear oil in there, I think, and put some fresh stuff in, and every now and again that'll probably do it. So ended up taking the cam handle off, and glad I did. That's all been cleaned out in there nicely. I'm going to repack it with grease, so I don't think oil's going to cut it. And but if you have a look at the beautiful design there, there's two lots of needle bearings in there, then of course the two opposite pieces here, and then that's a needle bearing seat there too, and that takes those guys, and then on the other side at the bottom there's another set as well. That's very well designed. So while I was cleaning up the fingers that push on the teeth, I see this one here has been worked on before and has been fixed. It must have snapped off at some stage or something like that, but that's not a hassle. This looks pretty close to the high-speed steel tooling that you get for lathes, and maybe just a little bit of grinding down to get it to the perfect size, and then grind those features into it. That should be easy enough to do. But yeah, it's coming together. This cleaning mainly just with a little bit of thinners. Tends to get all the old oil and gunk off and leave the paint in a reasonable condition. I prefer not to use it, but there's a fair bit of rubbish on here. Reassembly. Got that slide back on. Looking good, feeling very smooth. It was well worth sorting all of those issues out, just sort of getting all that oil out. So the grease, I've blown all the grease even out of this one here that goes into that feeder point over there. That's all been cleaned out. All of the back positions, the 4 of them, they were all filled with grease too. Taken all of that out, and now just keep cleaning and reassembling. This section a bit of a cleanup. I've done nothing else. I'm just putting it back in. I'm just aligning the pins around the back. About to put the pin that has the bolt head on. In hindsight, I could have left that one with the bolt head. I could have left the bolt on so that it pulled the pin out of the back housing instead of pulling it through, if you know what I mean. In other words, that one there left the bolt on. Sliding carriage and handle back on. Got that wound into its maximum. Take him back out a bit. Clamping working well. That one still seems a little bit tight. I think I just need to do a slight adjustment on that, and that'll be alright. Not too worried about that. And didn't end up taking that shaft out. I'm just going to give a little bit of ME paper around the base there where I couldn't get with the wire wheel. Just about all the other bits on, other than the unit that forwards the blade, as I still want to get that working better. There you go. That's it, done. Only part now is to redo the base, but I still want to look at how I'm going to modify it to do a bandsaw as well, so I might need to make a few extra fittings, but so far so pretty happy with that. Everything's running nice and smooth. Actually, I'm going to put some oil on that. And I have noticed that there's a different gap between there and there, so if I'm going to take these cover plate screws off, and I can actually adjust this. It sits on a round section, so once I adjust that into place, I think that part there is going to work a lot better. So the tolerances I've set it to are that when the blade brake is engaged, that when the handle is in its straight position, that the 2 nubs that push from each side are pretty much lined up. These are lined up with the push sections. They just sit underneath. I think it makes sense. I think that's how it's got to be. Another thing I've worked out is these actually don't need to spring back on by themselves. That they often will, but this one, just depending where the thing is sitting, it'll slide back. But as the machine is used, these scoops here actually push that matching section back, so even if it does stick, it just goes back into place as soon as the opposite way is done, so it's self-righting. So I really am happy with how everything's looking now. I've replaced these rods, beautiful little metal called Invar 36, and some brass heads on it, and those tighten up nicely, and that'll stop. So that gives the maximum travel, because what you find is you can adjust that clamping plate to whatever thickness the blade is. So even if it was a bandsaw blade, which is what the Mission is, that's easy done. These can be wound out accordingly from the back here to gain whatever distance length you want, The reason why there's no stop on the slide is because there's always going to be a difference to it, that whatever thickness blade you put in, it's going to be different. So in other words, the handle, where you're moving the handle, it's going to be, sometimes it'll be like that, other times it'll be like that, other times it'll be like that. So yeah, it's really looking good. Another thing is with this unit here for the sliding up and down, I think originally these things actually did come out with a bandsaw section that allowed you to put bandsaw blades on, or larger blades, because this unit here is only just a couple of holders at the back, and so then you can actually, by using the handles, you can actually raise the whole unit up, and then go right up to the top. Just lock that, it's kind of hard, need 3 hands here. You can bring that right up to the top, and so in essence your unit, which goes onto those 2 bolts there, it doesn't need much to change things to. You're just going to have to make a unit that goes in there, and it just uses these locating pins, which is bloody excellent. So really happy with that, and I'm going to try and keep your mob updated in regards to how it goes to make something that the bandsaws can go in, because it only really needs to be a slotted section that the bandsaw blade sits in, because the height of course is then adjustable, but that's going to have to be fairly high up. Quick demonstration on use is sorry about the wobbly frame, everything is wobbling, we're just on uneven ground here. Seems to take the blade to the same spot every time. So with this you'd go, okay, wind that further, only needs to go to a certain distance, not too much. So you can actually, that part can be operated fairly fast. You may even be able to mechanize this unit, but I've got no plans for that at this stage. I like to be a bit more hands-on. And then, so then with each one, you know, you'd push, forward it onto the next, push the opposite way, and these things are only moving a slight amount. That slide is only moving a tiny amount, as you can see there, but it seems that that's all the blade's going to need. And then of course with these fingers you'd set how far over it pushes the blade. If that's not accurate enough for me, I might bolt a section onto here with an adjustable bolt or screw, one on each side probably, and because it's nice. This head is, it must be 2-inch thick solid steel almost, or 1 inch and 7/8, something like that thick. So she's pretty big, she's got a lot of meat in, so that could, and then maybe when you're using it, then you wouldn't need to just be doing you could pretty much just go whack, 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 whack once you've adjusted it to whatever size you, or sort of what the bend is that you're after. So that's just an idea though, but so the next part is I'll do that in a separate video, is to make the actual unit that goes up and holds the bandsaw blade. I want to be able to go anywhere from maybe 1-inch bandsaw, so it won't be able to come up underneath there. It'll have to be like around on both sides, probably come up through there and on the other side, so that it still holds the blade nice, and the blade's not going to get too floppy. But it doesn't matter too much because this grabs it each time, so as long as it feeds in there properly, I think it's going to be a success.